instead of saying I have to get the most out of the lounge, which means drinking and eating all this kind of junky food, how about making the most of getting out of your trip? And so I think that mindset of, if your trip's focused on the race, then getting the most out of the race, you're getting the most out of your body. But yeah, really focus on getting the most out of your trip, I think is great, because then it's like, why would I drink this stuff here? Like, I could have that drink for $3 or $4 at home. Like, keep your body clean, feel great, have a race you can be proud of, and move around.
And welcome back. We have Andrew Herr joining on the podcast today. Andrew, thanks so much for taking some time to chat.
It's great to be here, Jonathan.
Of course. So the first question is always a tough one. And that question is, who is Andrew?
There's a lot of different answers to that question. Obviously, I think in the context of this call, I'm the guy trying to help people feel better and making it easier to be healthy while you travel. And that comes from a long history of working with the military and pro sports teams and inventing some tech. And here we are today.
So we've known each other for a number of years, from my work at Insight Tracker and your work at FlyKitt and some of the other businesses you've been a part of and organizations you've been a part of. And so it's fun to be able to connect here and dive further into how travel impacts performance and how you actually do have a lot more influence on the levers that can be pulled on, so that, when you land in Berlin or Sydney or Tokyo or Boston or wherever, you're not at the mercy of, if you feel good, you have a little bit more control or a lot more control over that. Yeah, I feel good. I'm ready to perform.
Yeah. And actually, like, the prior businesses are kind of relevant to the story. So we got to know each other a little bit when we were running a very high-end health and performance coaching service. We were running blood tests on everyone, wearable data, self-report, all these things to run N-of-1 experiments and figure out, okay, does this supplement work for you? Does that supplement work for you? What about this diet change, this exercise change? And one of the things we saw through working with these very successful, busy people was that travel was one of the biggest challenges for their health. And that, alongside having invented this statement is always a little bit awkward to say, but like having invented a cure for jet lag for more than 90% of people, it's only awkward because it seems crazy, but it's true. We have the data for it. Between those two things, we decided to focus on travel because it's such a big impact. And we now have a suite of tools and products around travel, but the core of it is based on some really fascinating insights around how flying causes inflammation in the body.
You mentioned something that I want to dive into, and I've been itching to write a Substack article or LinkedIn post about it. We've both been involved in blood testing and blood analysis for a long time. And in the last week or two, we've seen Whoop and Aura both release a blood product. You've spent a lot of time in the hands-on working with people one-on-one standpoint. What's your take on, everybody having a blood testing option now? And how did you interact with a program like that in the past?
I think there's a couple parts of this. One is the enough testing that people can catch things early. I'm super big fan of that. Just got off a call with somebody not that long ago. It was like, yeah, your blood sugar is now above normal and your insulin is skyrocketed, and you're on the train to type 2 diabetes direct. But if you take changes now, and got an email a few days later being like, I've already instituted these changes, and it's beautiful. I love that. So catching things early, I think, is great. Now you have to be smart though. The average person who's got a blood sugar that's a little bit elevated, but doesn't test their insulin, which might be low, doesn't realize that high blood sugar in the morning is stress and not diabetes and not metabolic problems, or doesn't see their A1C and know that it's, not high all the time. So, there's some real nuance here. And that's the challenge, is with the laws the way they are about giving people advice and the risk aversion being what they will be from bigger companies, can they figure out how to give really good advice? And then also just can you deliver nuance at scale? So that's the kind of first one or two pieces. And then the next piece is okay, you've gotten one blood test, so what now? The answer is the only really great way to use that data is to inform changes, but then you got to see if those changes are working. And so you really have to run things in an experiment. And so you need to be running pretty intentional about making one or a small number of changes at a time and then retesting at a reasonable interval. Reasonable interval depends on what you're testing, obviously. But so that's kind of how I think about it. We also think a lot about the nuance of hey, your ALT, which is a liver enzyme that can tell us if you're likely to have fatty liver disease, is in the normal range, but just a little bit under the top. Let me tell you, 20 years ago, the normal range was lower. And so you probably are on that train already, but like it says it's normal. And so there's always more nuance to be had. But the general case is like, can we deliver people the insights from it? And can we help them run experiments to know if it's working?
I love what you said. Can we deliver nuance at scale, right? That's what like everyone is chasing and trying to understand. Okay, it's one thing to help, 10 people or 100 people or even 1,000 people, but how do you help lots of people? And I feel like that's kind of the golden goose of what all these companies are chasing, which is let's build a strong business, but also let's help a lot of people go beyond just, eat more oatmeal and take a vitamin D supplement and really, understand how to influence health foundationally.
And I think there's, it's interesting. These moves are also a response to Function Health, bringing blood testing wide and being really successful. And so there's an interesting dance going on of like, is it the wearable plus the simple blood tests, or is it the in-depth blood test that Function offers? And I think there are pros and cons to each strategy. I'm very interested in, I think about the data set we have to build algorithms to make recommendations that they don't really have because we've been where the rubber meets the road more than they have. And so I think about how do we leverage the learnings from N of 1 experimentation in a world where more people have data.
Totally. And that was my experience at Insight Tracker too, with 100,000 users, right? Nobody has longitudinal data on 100,000 users over a 5+ year period, and seeing that trending, which is interesting. And now I'm consulting for a company called Eternal, and they've gone in totally the other direction. And the goal is to have doctors doing the interpretation and have humans doing the interpretation and performance dietitians who, spent time in military and special forces. And so it's just like a totally different approach to let's let algorithms drive guidance and compile as much data as possible versus let's let career doctors and dietitians who are also endurance athletes, apply the interventions and then ask, did it work, and have that ongoing feedback. I want to set the stage a little bit more. Can you share a bit more about your background with the U.S. military and, what gives you the credibility to speak from a position of like, I really get this?
Yeah, I always say if I lived my life 10 times, I would have been a doctor 5 of them. My dad's a doctor. I grew up around it. My mom's side of the family is like military, some no shit war hero stuff. Anyways, I ended up with this really weird background. I ended up with a degree in immunology, a master's in immunology, a master's in health physics, and a third master's in national security policy. And somebody walked into the career center at Georgetown where I was going to school and said, we need someone who does biology, national security, and can write. And they're like, well, we know this guy, Andrew. And serendipity and synchronicity being what they are, I ended up taking a job running studies looking at the future of human enhancement for the Secretary of Defense's private think tank on the future of warfare. So sort of like, what could be 20 years from now? What might we be able to do? What might our adversaries do? And so that really, I think, set the stage to think about the future and think about what we should be doing. And then I spent a few years working on how do we use data coming in from venture capital investments, from scientific publications, from patents, to predict where technology is going to go and then decide where the military should invest. And along the way, I also got to work with individuals and like more rubber meets the road stuff, work with some people, getting them ready for deployment, including some special ops guys. And then was working on a project kind of that I initiated with a Navy SEAL unit, trying to figure out some very long duration missions and how to optimize endurance and performance. And that exposed me to data showing that the pressure changes in diving were causing inflammation. And then I was able to tie that based on some work I did with them and then with fighter pilots to show that the pressure changes in flight were causing inflammation. And that was sort of the start of figuring out that every time we fly, our system gets totally dysregulated by the pressure change in flight and then the low oxygen environment. Taking off in a plane is like climbing an 8,000-foot mountain in 15 minutes. That's going to do a number on your body. And then you're at like roughly 74% of normal oxygen for however long you're on that plane. And so these things cause oxidative stress, can cause inflammation. And it's not that the circadian rhythm thing isn't key to jet lag, it is, but the inflammation is what causes it to be so bad and then also makes it harder to reset your circadian rhythm. Fast forward to me being a private coach with high-end executives. And by the way, this is no longer just what I do with the military. This is sort of my whole story arc, but here we are. Somebody said, hey, Andrew, we're flying to Asia from the US. We land at 4 p.m. There's a big business dinner that night, and they want to negotiate starting the next morning at like 7 a.m. They're using jet lag as a negotiating tool. What should I do? And I was like, great. When's your next trip? He's like, Tuesday. Of course, it was Sunday. I was like, thanks, David. I'll get you something tomorrow. And so I took all the knowledge I had, put it together, circadian rhythm, sleep, managing the effects of not enough sleep, the inflammation from that, support like managing inflammation, all these things together, circadian rhythm, resetting the central circadian rhythm in the brain, resetting the peripheral circadian rhythm in the body and liver, put it all together, typed it out in a Microsoft Word document, give him a box of supplements and stuff. He left, sends me an email like 1 or 2 days later from Korea. What did you do? I just slept 8 hours my first night. And if that first one hadn't worked, I probably would have just never thought about it again. But instead, it worked and it kept working and it kept working. And there was clear that there was a protocol to eliminate jet lag for most people.
How did the negotiation go?
Great. He nailed it because, nobody expects you to be totally fresh. Now, his partners were just a mess, apparently, but nobody expects you to be totally fresh. And you come in totally fresh and suddenly they go from thinking they have the advantage to you have the advantage.
It's such a fascinating tactic to force someone to fly in and then get them going at 7 a.m. the next morning. Okay, so what did that unlock for you? What was the there's something here?
Yeah, I mean, so basically I was like, wow, this protocol works, or it seems to work. It's pretty hard to placebo somebody out of jet lag. I mean, I'm a convincing guy, I like to think, and people like me and such, but that's a pretty hard placebo. So basically the next step was like, hey, let's try it again with other people. Tried it, refined it, tried it, refined it. And because it kept working, I was like, okay, there's something real here. And this hypothesis that the pressure changes in flight causing inflammation, I can also just see it in my body. I spent a lot of time experimenting in my body. Some parts of me are, like everyone, some parts of me are more susceptible to inflammation than others. And I was able to really track in my own body and then run these protocols and variants of them on myself. And so one guinea pigged it myself. I used to feel terrible flying. In fact, it really for a while, I wanted to stop traveling entirely. But now I have a protocol. It's sort of the next generation FlyKitt protocol. We have the current one, and I'm always testing the next gen one on myself. And man, it's hard to believe how big a difference it makes.
So what did you do next?
So that was a point in my career where I was starting to think about scaling. You said earlier, how do we go from helping 10 or 20 people to helping 10,000 or a million or 10 million? And so I started then really thinking over time about how to scale this. And my initial thought was I have this special thing, this jet lag protocol. Let's start with that. It's customizable via algorithm. So, the best things are customized and the best products are customizable automatically, right? You just can't have a person, me, doing these for everybody. So it was kind of the perfect storm. And my belief was that we could develop these customizable via algorithm products for start with jet lag, then maybe go to sleep, then, increasing complexity. And so I spent a lot of time building the concept and then eventually failing to raise venture capital money and then learning how to do it and then raising venture capital money to build a company, to build this jet lag product first. And we closed our first funding round the Friday before everything closed for COVID, when international travel was just not a thing. And so, of course, in that moment, what do? We pivoted to the long-term vision, which was hey, can we just collect these unique N of 1 data sets and start building kind of a holistic program? And so we used the venture capital money to start that, built that, got that bigger, raised more money.
Was that Fount?
That was Fount. And then saw that model we were building at the very high end wasn't going to be scalable enough to get where we wanted to go for that. And in the meantime, the jet lag product suddenly 5x'd in 6 months. And so at the same time as we were contemplating how to scale, the jet lag product was hockey sticking. And from the coaching, we saw what a big deal travel was. And so we used those two signals to say, let's go all in on making it easy to be healthy while you travel. And so now we have FlyKitt, our jet lag product. We ran a study with Inter Miami, the pro soccer team where Messi plays. They used it on a round the world trip. 94% less travel symptoms for people who use FlyKitt compared to those who didn't. In our internal data, 93% of people can travel anywhere in the world with minimal to no jet lag. And we just launched our FlyKitt domestic product because you don't get jet lag flying to Chicago usually from anywhere in the US. But man, you still get that inflammatory hit from flying. So now we have a simpler, cheaper protocol for domestic travel. And then we have AI that can help you find the healthiest food anywhere in the world. We have AI that can help you work out in any gym in the world. Just take photos of the equipment. It makes a workout for that gym. And so kind of like really focused all around healthy travel and making that easy for people and smooth.
Can you talk more about the difference between the inflammation component and the time zone challenges? Why do people think that the time zone is the biggest issue?
It is a huge issue because you do wake up and fall asleep at the wrong times when you're in another place because you haven't reset your circadian rhythm. But the problem is to reset your circadian rhythm to the right time zone, you can't sleep too much. That seems like a strange thing, right? But if I get on a plane to Tokyo and I sleep 8 hours, I'm going to wake up at like 4 p.m. Tokyo time. And then if I get off that plane, I'm not going to be able to go to bed at like 6 hours later if I slept 8 hours. So now you have to sleep less. But the problem with sleeping less is sleeping less causes inflammation in the body. Short sleep, sleep restriction causes inflammation. It's sort of the first order negative effect. And now you have inflammation from this and inflammation from flying. And in the immune system, a double hit is exponential. And so now suddenly you feel bad. You've got the brain fog, your body feels terrible, joints swelling, guts off. That stuff dysregulates all kinds of rhythms in the body. So now you've got all these inflammatory things that are going to mess with your sleep, and you're just not going to be able to go to sleep at the right time. You haven't reset your circadian rhythm. So what we're doing is we're not ignoring the circadian thing. In fact, we're really doubling down on it. But by blocking the inflammation, not just for the flying, but also managing it for that initial short sleep, we can give you exactly the right amount of sleep, exactly the right time, and then use supplements, light, meal timing, the amount of sleep we give you, all those things to shift your circadian rhythm. And when we do that together in a concert, that's how we flip your circadian rhythm overnight, get rid of the inflammation. And we hear from people like, wow, some people tell us they feel better than they do at home on their first day, but like people just tell us they feel great. And we get this comment very often, which is, I was kind of skeptical when you said you could cure jet lag, but I figured, hey, you got a money back guarantee. I'll take a flyer on it, but now I'll never travel without it. And so that obviously is super gratifying to us.
So you guys sent me a kit. I have not had a chance to use it because I have not flown anywhere with more than a 2-hour time zone change. So I've been like waiting to use it and hoping to go somewhere a bit further in the next few months with like a 6-7 hour flight. So it'll get a chance to be used soon. But can you talk about like the nutritional components of like what enables this?
Yeah. So the first thing you want to do is block as much of that inflammatory signal as you can. So that means soaking up some of the oxidative stress, in particular, vitamin C is helpful for that. And then we want to activate the cellular protection systems in the cells. And so we use plant polyphenols for that. We use an organic pomegranate extract. And then you got to keep the inflammation level low and support the brain. And so we're using a high dose 1-to-1 EPA DHA, specially refined omega-3 fatty acid composition to do that. And then you need to boost someone's energy and lower melatonin levels when you don't want them high. And then so we use a methylated B6, B12 mix for that. Then when somebody arrives, you need to reset not just their central circadian rhythm, but their peripheral, so the gut, liver. And so we actually use a sugar methylated B vitamin mix for that. Now, sugar is usually bad for inflammation, and we all know that. But at this point, we're going to use it to reset your circadian rhythm, so it's actually helpful. And then we're going to block the negative effects of that using some anti-inflammatory things coming after that. And then we use a magnesium glycinate melatonin mix to not even really to put you to sleep. We don't use high-dose melatonin because it messes with people. We use low-dose melatonin as a timing signal that it's the time to go to bed.
Like 2 milligrams or something like that?
1 milligram, 2 max, depending on your protocol. And we also use blue light blocking glasses as well, which is super helpful. So, and the kit comes with everything. And the nice thing is, unlike me typing out a Microsoft Word doc for this guy, David, we have an app now that gives you a custom program. We have an algorithm that runs AI behind the scenes, can update it if your flight's delayed, and then it just gives you a notification anytime you have to do anything. So it's super simple to do.
Super cool. Given your experience with the military and special forces, did you consider creatine in this?
Yeah, absolutely. Creatine can be a great tool. It's just bulky. Like you need a lot of it, right? And so putting it in capsules is kind of a no-go. You'd need 8 to 10 capsules. And then as another stick pack, it is something we may add for the future, but right now we've got a protocol that's so effective that they're just adding more and more things. Also, it adds costs for us, but also can be very helpful. And obviously it's great for athletes. But yeah, I think that's one of those add-ons. We're looking at like kind of a quick meal, protein, fiber, shake add-on. We just added earplugs, which I think it's easy to underestimate how much the sound environment in a plane messes with your brain. So we just added earplugs. Those will go live this week. We have compression socks. We have Firefly nerve stimulators that triple the blood flow to your leg. So we do add, and then we have protocols that are sort of like double down on supporting your immunity for people who get sick when they travel. We call it an immunity kit, like FlyKitt. And then we have a Fiesta kit for people who are going to be drinking on vacation, because drinking actually causes inflammation too.
So a lot of people listening to this are probably nodding along like, hey, yeah, I'm definitely had the negative impact of travel. And at the same time, this is one of those things that like, you know, is impacting you, but you're going to do it anyway because you want to do the race in Berlin or Chamonix or Australia or whatever. So for someone who's listening and they're approaching marathon season or they're approaching a race that's far away, how should they think about travel?
So inflammation obviously affects both our performance and our recovery. So I think you want to be thinking about it on the front end and the back end, as well as injury propensity. So on the front end, you want, obviously our protocol is great, but if you're not going to use FlyKitt, you do want to be thinking about what anti-inflammatory tools you can be using. Can you do a small workout before you get on the plane? That obviously sucks some inflammation out of your system. When you get there, working out does the same on the back end. Sauna, cold plunge, and then the kinds of antioxidant and anti-inflammatory nutrients that we're talking about are very helpful. Obviously, I'm biased. The simple, easy, mega effective way to do it is buy a FlyKitt. But on the back end, also think about how it affects your recovery. We're working with somebody right now who's going for an Ironman world record. It's like 7 Ironmans on 7 continents in 7 months, or one of those kinds of things. I think I messed up the exact details, but she's got to think a lot about recovery on the back end, because if she has a month between races, 1 week of being messed up is a quarter of her time towards the next race. And so, the kinds of recovery tools that she uses FlyKitt, but in addition to that are, she's using tart cherry juice post-race, and you want to use the stuff that actually works instead of the stuff that's been sitting on a store shelf for a long time, needs to be stored frozen. You want to be, she's using extra doses of these polyphenol anti-inflammatory nutrients. So really thinking about how to manage the post-race recovery also is really valuable. And any anti-inflammatory approaches and tools you can use on both sides. And then just the standard things, your blood volume can decrease about 8% on a flight. Historically, that's been talked about because of dehydration. I think part of it is actually the inflammation sucks fluid into our tissues. It's kind of swelling. So I think there's actually 2 things going on there, but obviously hydrating well and moving on a plane, super high value too.
Can you talk about how solving cabin dehydration isn't just about drinking water and how to land fully hydrated?
Yeah, so there's studies on this showing that water is not as effective as a electrolyte solution, is not as effective as an electrolyte solution plus carbs. Now the trick there is you got to be a little bit careful, because the carbohydrates could contribute to the inflammatory things. So you got to really experiment with your body. For most people, probably the best option is an electrolyte solution. We actually are looking right now at developing an electrolyte solution specifically tailored to what you lose and how much you lose on flights. We don't have that ready yet, but it's actually one of the things in our pipeline. So you do want to manage that. But if a lot of that fluid loss is fluid going to tissue, then our protocol is going to manage some of that in the FlyKitt side. But yeah, you do want to be thinking about electrolytes. And then again, going for ones that aren't going to put a lot of junk in your body and make your gut more susceptible to inflammation. Everyone has a favorite one. I'm one of those, people that some people might call sociopaths, because I drink the unflavored LMNT, which is just salt stuff, but all the flavors and stuff just don't work with my body.
So we talked about hydration. Let's talk about food, right? I flew 36 times last year, is the most I've flown in a year. And I spent a lot of time in airports and usually around meal times, because flying out of Denver is a mess in the afternoon. We're flying into Denver is a mess in the afternoon, in the summer in particular. So it's a lot of 8 a.m. flights or 5 p.m. flights back from Boston. And so I enter the airport either hungry or needing to eat a meal in the air. How do I make better decisions, or how do I navigate the options that are available that support feeling good both in the air and when you land?
Yeah, so when your inflammation is higher, your blood sugar is sort of less well regulated. So we really counsel smaller meals, higher protein, lower carbohydrate, and then the vegetables provide these anti-inflammatory polyphenols as well as the fiber for your gut to protect it. So we really counsel smaller meals, higher protein, lower carb. Make sure you're getting vegetables. And so that's probably the optimal solution. Some people fast, and there's been this whole thing about fasting for jet lag, which by the way makes sense because it's helping protect against the inflammation. But fasting also then deprives your brain of nutrients, which is kind of an issue when you want to be performing and aren't sleeping that well, things like that. So that's why we prefer our protocol where you don't have to fast, but fasting is certainly an option. But if you're going to be eating, which is probably optimal for performance as long as you're managing the inflammation otherwise, then that's where we go, higher protein, lower carb. And just like careful with all the processed crap, all the sauces and everything else. We actually have an AI system we call Foodie that will show you the restaurants with the healthiest meals in the airport.
That's awesome. Shout out to the Sapphire Lounge in Boston that has the most delicious protein choices and wonderful vegetable options as well. You can get a really nice hamburger and then some good veggies to go along with it, and sweet potato and some good stuff like that. I love that lounge. And every time I fly out of Logan, I add like an hour or so I can go in there and eat.
No, yeah. I mean, a good lounge is a great option. So yeah, like there's usually a decent option somewhere, and yeah, smaller meals.
For sure. So when you get on a plane, what's the first thing that you do? Or when you're heading to the airport or when you have a travel day, what does Andrew's routine look like?
If I have enough time, I'd like to work out before, but I'm not going to push myself super hard in the workout, usually because I know my recovery is going to get messed up by flying. So it's a trade-off there. But I told you I'm always like testing the next gen FlyKitt stuff. So I'm probably like in the airport, in the lounge, or just waiting for the plane, like with a water bottle, like pouring powders and capsules in there, like literally opening up capsules and pouring them in the water to shake it around, doing a little bit of chemistry. I've been playing with a new polyphenol mix that I've been testing recently. And then I found also, I like to really double down on gut support. So I'm going to be taking also curcumin, quercetin, psyllium, magnesium mix. That's super helpful. I'm going to do that. I'm not going to have eaten for a few hours beforehand if I can, because I want to go in kind of feeling light and just protecting my gut also. So yeah, that's like, I'm thinking about those things. And then I'm popping my earplugs in when I get on the plane. I have a little inflatable backrest. Like those seats are not designed for a human lumbar curve. So I've got like a little inflatable thing that's the best possible way to make your seat feel more comfortable. And then whatever I'm going to do on the plane, I'm going to work, I'm going to read.
How does alcohol affect travel?
Alcohol, unfortunately, produces poor quality sleep and inflammation. And so, for people who are like, oh, I just have 3 glasses of wine, I fall asleep on the plane. True, but you are like nuking your body from the standpoint of inflammation from that. And so it's a real trade-off. We recommend it's best not to drink until you've had a full night of sleep at your destination. For some people, that's just not what they want to do or not feasible. And so all the tools we've talked about that help manage inflammation and shift your circadian rhythm, they still help. The alcohol will make it work less well, but it's still really effective. So my answer is like, it's almost more important to be doing all these things if you're going to drink. But if you can hold off, then that'll make your jet lag less bad. It'll make you feel better when you get to your destination.
What sort of guidance do you have for someone who is training for a destination race where it's like their A race of the season and it's not just a fun run? It's like I'm spending a lot of time and money, emphasis on both, to land in Tokyo and run my marathon PR, or like I spent all this effort collecting stones so I could run a UTMB race. And, you might invest $10,000 and 2 or 3 races to get there. Like you've put a lot of effort and time in, besides for buying FlyKitt and going through the protocol. Like how should somebody be thinking about maximizing race day performance at 30,000 feet?
Yeah. So, the first thing you're going to do if you have the time is go a day or 2 early. And by early, I mean earlier than you were. And that's for the relaxation component. That's for the getting in your groove there component. That's for making sure you can do your last kind of tune-up run or whatever you're going to do beforehand. That's great. And then you just want to throw everything at it. That's compression socks, maybe one of those Firefly nerve stims. Obviously, our FlyKitt stuff's really helpful. And then just being really thoughtful on the nutrition side, making sure you're eating super clean. Maybe that means bringing food with you. Can't bring liquids, but you can sure bring a glass locked Tupperware with food through the airport as long as it's not like stew or soup. And I've done that many times and they don't bother me about it. And so I'm going to have that food with me. And then, when you're on the plane or in the lounge, like some people have this mindset of like, oh, I have to get the most out of it. And I'd say like, let's take the step back of, instead of saying I have to get the most out of the lounge, which means drinking and eating all this kind of junky food, how about making the most of getting out of your trip? And so I think that mindset of, if your trip's focused on the race, then getting the most out of the race, you're getting the most out of your body. But yeah, really focused on getting the most out of your trip, I think is great, because then it's like, why would I drink this stuff here? Like, I could have that drink for $3 or $4 at home. Like $100 bottle of liquor is still only like $3 or $4 a drink if you buy it at home. Like you're not getting that much out of it. So keep your body clean, feel great, have a race you can be proud of, and move around. And the last piece is, if you're not using FlyKitt, I said this earlier, don't sleep too much, because having the first day be a little painful because you didn't sleep as much on the plane versus throwing your circadian rhythm for a loop by sleeping too much, I think is good. And that means really, how much is the right amount? Like, depends on the flight, but let's put it this way. It is rare that sleeping for more than 4.5 hours is a good thing unless you're doing an overnight flight to Europe.
So you're suggesting not sleeping a lot on the plane?
Usually sleeping about 4.5 hours is the maximum you'd want to do if there's a big time change. That might be different if you're going to like South America and it's not a big time change. But if you're going from the East Coast to Europe, you almost never want to sleep more than 4.5 hours. If you're going from the West Coast to Asia, usually you might want to only sleep 3 hours, could be 4.5 in certain cases, depending on your flight time. But like there are many times when sleeping less is better on that plane sleep, and then powering through to get to that night at your destination.
Because you arrive and it's daytime?
Because if you sleep too much, you arrive and now it's like 2 p.m. and you've slept a lot and you're not going to get to bed that night. If you don't get to bed that first night, then you're in trouble.
So what happens so I flew to Scotland last year, and we flew and got there like, 10 in the morning, and we were exhausted and we just stayed awake and fell asleep at 8 p.m. and woke up at 2 a.m. And the sun came up at 4 a.m. because it was June in a far northern part of Scotland. What do you do when you wake up in the middle of the night? Let's say you've not nailed the routine. It's 2 a.m. I can't sleep.
It's tricky. If you're already up, you're in a tricky situation. By the way, that 2 a.m. was roughly 7, 8 a.m. on the East Coast when you probably would normally wake up. You're in a pretty tough spot now. You have two options. One, I would try, is there a meditation or breath work thing you can do for 15, 20 minutes and see if you can get back to sleep? If you can, great. If not, and you're up, then the move is to start your day and do a nap in the middle of the day to get you to that night. So if you're starting at 2 a.m., that means you've lost, you're maybe 6 hours early, right? To stay up an additional 6 hours, you typically want to give about 1.5 hours of napping. So I would say go to noon, take a 90-minute nap, and then from 1:30, stay up and go to bed that night. That's typically what you want to do.
And then do you see that if you follow that protocol, you're pretty much reset by the next day?
The problem is if you're that far off and you don't have the supplement tools and the blue light blocking glasses and melatonin and the other stuff, you're not going to move 6 hours in one day. It's just not going to happen. If you think about it, I'm using 5 to 7 different things, because some happen more than once, throughout your trip. And if each of those moves you 1.5 hours, I can shift your circadian rhythm 11 hours if I need to. That means I can do anywhere in the world. And so what I'm saying is I'm using every tool combined in a perfectly orchestrated way to do it. So now you're oh, can I just use a nap to switch 6 hours in one day? And the answer is no, you can't, but it'll help.
Yeah. What sort of surprising takeaways have you seen, and how has that helped inform product innovation?
One of the most surprising is that, people always talk about how they get sick when they fly and travel. They're oh, the plane, you're sitting next to all these people in an airport. I think that has very little to do with it. I think you get sick when you travel because the inflammation, distracts your immune system. We hear from all these people who are I used to get sick every time I traveled. Now I use FlyKitt and I don't get sick. They've shown the filters in the plane refresh the air very often. And, you're at a mall, which is not that different from an airport in a lot of ways. So my sense is that this getting sick actually has to do with the inflammation and its effects on your immune system, and much less to do with being near people in an airplane. That's definitely one. And that informs both our design of the FlyKitt protocol and then our immunity kit protocol that we offer alongside it as kind of an add-on for sure.
What is in that immunity kit?
It doubles down on protecting kind of every part of your body in a way that boosts cellular protection systems. So we're using a lot of polyphenols. So we're using different fruit and vegetable extracts that activate this pathway called NRF2. Basically, this is a pathway that tells your cell to produce more protective enzymes, to produce more detox stuff. We're using things that protect your gut. We're giving you the zinc and vitamin D that kind of help keep your immune system regulated. We're giving you a little bit of a sleep boost with a small dose of melatonin. We're kind of orchestrating all these different things to protect your gut and your general immune system to keep it calm and ready. Like if your immune system is frenetic and it's freaked out by inflammation, it's just not going to be ready to kill the bacteria or virus over here or over there. And so we want to keep everything calm and ready. We're not down-regulating it. We're taking the noise out of the signal.
Makes sense. One of the things you mentioned that many people listening might already have accessible to them is the recovery socks or the compression socks. Can you talk about why that works and why it's useful on an airplane?
Yeah, so when you're sitting on an airplane, that plus the inflammatory effects cause blood to pool in your legs. We've all probably felt the swelling in our feet and ankles. By the way, swelling is an inflammatory thing too. As we all know, if you like hurt your knee or something, it swells up. And so they put pressure on, which increase the pressure down there, helps venous return, helps blood flow back up out the veins and prevents some of that swelling, some of that inflammation there. So helps your legs feel lighter and feel better when you get off plane. So definitely like those and recommend people wear them when they fly. You can put them on right before you get on the plane, or you can put them on the morning you leave. Doesn't matter.
You've also mentioned the Firefly devices. I've used those before, and it's like a little twitch in your vein or in your nerve that is basically doing a similar thing that the flush of a Hyperice boots would do, right?
Yeah, so basically you end up putting this thing on. It's easy to do. You put it kind of where there's an electrical transmitter right over the nerve that feeds the muscles that kind of cause your foot to pump. And that pumping motion or the like tapping motion of your foot causes the muscles to change shape, right? And it causes actually like a physical pumping motion. And that pumping can triple blood flow into your leg. And so it's a weird feeling the first time you do it, for sure.
And second and third.
To be fair, it's always weird, but it does work. And then the other thing to keep your mind on is if you're going to sleep on a plane, like I would not want to sleep with it on. I turn it off when I go to sleep. But they're good for 24 hours of use. So you can use them there and use them coming back. You just got to keep the little plastic backing and take them off your leg and put them back on. They're a pretty effective tool, and they're like a little bit more logistically annoying, and they have a sticky back on them, which is a little weird, but they definitely work. And for people who really get the leg swelling in that and feel heavy legs, definitely recommend giving it a try.
You've worked with a lot of top performers in sports and military and business. What are some of the takeaways that you've learned from how these types of people maximize travel and time on the road?
Planning. You can plan a lot of different things. You can plan access to food. You can plan what plane you're flying on. So when we consult with pro sports teams, one of the things I ask is, do you have an option of what charter flight you're going on? Because it turns out that the difference between a 777 and a 787 is the difference of cabin pressure at 8,000 feet versus 5,000 feet. It's a huge difference. So if you can, whenever possible, fly 787s or A350s because they're these ceramic bodies that have a better cabin pressure.
I love the A350.
It's a great plane. So basically you want to think about what plane you're on, what time you fly. The general heuristic, if you're on a long international overnight flight, is you want to leave late and arrive later. Because if you leave earlier and arrive really early at your destination, then let's say you arrive at 7 a.m. Now you have to stay up for like 14, 15 hours. You might want to only have to stay up for like 12, 13 hours. And again, these are things that we're taking into account in our protocols, but typically want to leave later, arrive later. And then where you're going to be eating, what you have scheduled, when you're going to work out, the teams we're working on, when's the best time to have practice and things like that. We're working with some NFL teams right now. We've got, international games this year. So we've been supporting 3 different NFL teams and supplement protocols, FlyKitt, scheduling, what time they're having team meals, all that stuff is on board. So I'd say planning and then just like confidence in the plan, having confidence. And not all these high performers do this, but like this is also just a separate recommendation. Have some fun with it. Like, if you're doing something because you feel like you have to do it, it's not going to be great. But if you're doing it because it's part of your goal and you're excited to have a great race in Japan, then, bring that kind of energy towards it and it'll be a lot more fun.
Anything else I missed that we didn't cover?
I mean, this is a little bit of a plug, but like, obviously you've heard me talk about the inflammation from flying. It's not just on international. There's a domestic thing too. So flying to your domestic races, you're getting that inflammatory hit. So all these tools there, but the FlyKitt International product we have for jet lag is overkill. So we just launched a FlyKitt domestic product, which is, less than 30% of the price and super effective and simple to use. Not that I want to say FlyKitt International is complicated. It's just, it has more steps because you need to solve the jet lag piece. So we really recommend people try that FlyKitt domestic. It's an awesome product. And everything we sell has a money back guarantee. So if it doesn't work, you can just get your money back. So there's really not much risk there.
Cool. Andrew, appreciate the chat. And hopefully people listening can implement some of these recommendations.
Thanks, Jonathan. Great to be on here. And for everyone listening, have a great race.
Thanks.